Welcome to episode 41 of Successful Demo, each episode analyzes the threat and card aspects of one newly released cards. Today we'll be looking at the two Wayland Eyes released very recently, Masvingo and Oduduwa. Sorry, not making fun of the name. I think it's a really cool name and I love it very much. Anyway, we begin by talking about the etymology. Masvingo is actually a town in Zimbabwe, and I believe the name alludes to the Great Zimbabwe, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site near the town of Masvingo itself. And I quote Wikipedia, among the Great Zimbabwe's most prominent features were its walls, some of which were over 5 meters high. I guess that explains why Masvingo was ultimately designed as a barrier with its very interesting effect. Moving on to Oduduwa. Oduduwa is actually an emperor / monarch, and the name comes from the power of the womb that brings forth into existence, omnipotence, reconstructing the physical reality at will. I don't know about that. How Oduduwa's meaning translates into the ice effect is an exercise left to you, the viewer. For now, we'll talk about the mechanics of the card, starting with Masvingo again. This is an ice that I've been waiting for a very long time, because if you remember from Rotation / Core 2.0, we lost all the Wayland advanceable ice that scale with +1 subroutine per advancement counter, and Masvingo is actually decent this time. For those of you who weren't around when the first original core set was released, this was what advanceable ice used to look like. In 4 letters, shit. Yeah, Masvingo is basically a straight up upgrade from these pretty much unplayable ice back in the day. All its stats are basically superior in every single way. I mean, it loses 1 strength to Tyrant, but otherwise its res cost was slashed by more than half. And most importantly, I believe, is the fact that Masvingo actually does something by itself, because upon resing, you get 1 advancement token on it. So back in the day, Tyrant, this crappy piece of ice, used to be blank until you could get advancement counters on it, and you couldn't advance it while it was unres, making it doubly worse. Masvingo, on the other hand, is definitely playable by itself, but it really shines when you can get some additional advancement counters on it, but either by pre-advancing it, post-advancing it, or using some other synergistic card. Typically, these synergistic cards add 3 advancement counters to ice. Yeah, we are thinking of things like Priority Construction, SSO Industries with 3-point public agenda, etc. So that would leave you with 4 Masvingo advancement counters, 3 from the source, Priority Construction / SSO, and 1 advancement token from the res of Masvingo itself, which means that it will have 4 subroutines, a very decent amount of subroutines for a 3 res ice. In fact, that would be very taxing to against decks that aren't able to destroy Masvingo or to break all subroutines at a fixed cost, because you can continue scaling Masvingo upwards and upwards, making it that much harder for the runner to penetrate. Now let's talk about Oduduwa. This ice, on the other hand, doesn't have the prettiest of res to break ratios. 7 res cost for a 5 strength code gate is nowadays. However, it does have the on encounter effect, and I would argue that that is basically the only reason you would consider playing this ice, because it allows you to clicklessly and creditlessly charge up your other advanceable ice. That is a big deal. We know that these effects don't come easily and don't come for cheap, so Oduduwa will help you with that. The real question is, how do you make Oduduwa's effect impactful? Because you only get to place X advancement counters on each runner encounter, and X is the number of advancement counters currently on Oduduwa, meaning that if you play Oduduwa by itself, you only get 1 advancement counter on another of your ice, which is very mediocre. You want to cheat more counters on it, but you can't. It's not an advanceable ice, right? Even though it works with advancement counters on it, you cannot manually advance it. This means that cards that require your ice to be advanceable, like firmware updates and shipment from Kaguya, are out of the question. Those do not work on Oduduwa. Instead, you must play cards that allow you to place advancement counters on ice, regardless of whether they are advanceable or not. That includes Satellite Grid, dedication ceremony, and priority construction. The next problem with Oduduwa is that you want to trigger its effect multiple times. It's pretty bad if you're only getting one Oduduwa trigger out of this, for obvious reasons. The more triggers you get, the more advancement counters you have among all your eyes, opening up lots of possible plays and making your eyes that much stronger. So if you want to build an Oduduwa deck, you need to be able to force the runner through the Oduduwa multiple times, one way or another. This implies that Oduduwa on centrals is really bad because all the runner needs to do is to ignore the server. So you need to have Oduduwa on a remote server and then constantly stuff important stuff in the server, forcing the runner to continuously check it. That's nice because then you can put your Oduduwa advancements onto central ice, buffing up your centrals while they check your remotes, so it's a win-win for you. The last restriction on Oduduwa is that it is unique, which kind of explains, the design is obviously explained by its origin, which is being a monarch. Obviously it's going to be a unique ice. And this is a problem. This is a big problem because this, among other things, this means that you cannot put Oduduwa on each of your servers and expect to reliably get its trigger. You also cannot charge up a second Oduduwa with your first Oduduwa, thereby amplifying the number of advancement counters you have across the board. That just doesn't work that way. All that being said, however, even though it's unique, you still want to play 3 copies of it in your deck. This is counterintuitive, but I will say that because of what we mentioned earlier, because we need to induce the runner to run on this multiple times, we need to see Oduduwa early. Don't be fooled by its high res cost. You want to res it early. Otherwise, how are you going to get the runner to run on it multiple times? So you need to set this up early, which means you need to reliably draw it, so we play 3 copies. This is not an ice you want to res in the late game. It's too expensive for, a 2 subroutine 5 strength code gate. And getting one Oduduwa trigger in the late game is going to be virtually useless, especially if the runner is not forced to run through the ice that you just advanced with Oduduwa. So it's a very weird piece of ice with so many restrictions that I find it very, very difficult to build a deck around. I was initially excited when Oduduwa was initially spoiled because, wow, Wayland, a bulky Wayland ice with end the run subroutines as a code gate. Seems pretty good. But the more I thought about it, the more restrictive it seemed, to the point where building a deck around it would be pretty jank, and that's what we're going to be building today. Jank. But first, let's talk about the ice that synergize very well with Oduduwa. Obviously, we are going to play advanceable ice, and Masvingo ties in very well with that. We note that Oduduwa allows you to place advancement counters on already advanced ice. This is in contrast to SSO Industries, where you can only place advancements on unadvanced ice. So this means that you can potentially make your Masvingos, your Ice Walls, and your Colossuses, all these ice that scale with advancement counters limitlessly. You can, charge these up very to the point where the runner struggles very much to deal with these ice. This is exactly what we are planning to do, and these ice feed into this strategy very well. A big shout out also to Orion, because Oduduwa typically gets 4 advancement counters on it. 1 upon the first encounter and 3 from cheating it in with priority construction. So with 4 advancement counters, placing them on Orion makes Orion's rest cost 3, making it a lot more playable for this very chunky piece of ice. So we want to play Orion as well. I like these ice. They are very taxing, a little reliant on getting Oduduwa set up, but that's what we are building our deck around. This is basically a full-on Oduduwa deck. We are also going to, according to what we said just now, force the runner to run through our Oduduwa remote multiple times. The main way we are going to achieve this is to play MC Austerity Policy. This is a must trash for almost all runners, and we are going to make them run through an Oduduwa just to kill the MCA. Of course, we're going to jam regular agendas in the remote as well, but there are only so many agendas we can feed to the runner. Biovault is a very interesting card. We can bluff our agendas as Biovaults and vice versa. Biovault really helps because it ends the run like a Nisei Mark II token. This means that potentially if you have an agenda and a Biovault in the Oduduwa remote, they'll have to run twice to get to your agenda. That's 2 triggers of Oduduwa that you're going to get a double win for you. And speaking of double wins, that's where the twins come into play. It fits perfectly into this deck, as janky of an upgrade as it is, because we're running 3 copies of Oduduwa, but expect to only have 1 of them in play. What are you going to do with the spare copies? Well, we're going to feed them to the twins, of course, force the runner to encounter our Oduduwa multiple times, and get huge numbers of advancement counters on everything. That's our plan, and that's our deck. So it looks very janky, and trust me it is, but that's mostly because we are building around an ice that has a lot of restrictions in Oduduwa. I won't explain the rest of the deck. All the cards are in there for specific reasons. Executive Bootcamp, Boom, Dedication Ceremony, Preemptive Action. I'll leave you to figure out why I put those ice in the deck. Those cards in the deck. For now, we're just gonna skip right on to the game. Today we are playing up against the ever wonderful Chook Flowers Valencia. Unfortunately, as amazing as our opening hand looks, it's pretty bad. We are playing an Oduduwa deck, remember. We want to see 2 cards in our hand early. We want to see an Oduduwa, and we want to see an advancement counter card, probably Priority Construction. Our hand has neither, so even though there are no agendas, we are forced to mulligan into a hand with agendas, but we do find a turn 1 Oduduwa and Prycon. That's amazing! That's absolutely amazing! So we Prycon the Oduduwa and leaves ourselves with 3 agendas in hand. Perfect first turn play. Now we just cross our fingers and hope that Valencia doesn't run HQ, because if they are going to, we are forced to play rest the Hortum, go down to 0 credits. That's never nice. Well, that doesn't happen, but something equally bad happens. They hit a mining accident. Because our deck relies on taxing ice with advancement counters, we are not in good shape at all. Gaining bad pub is the last thing we want to do, and this deck has no way to mitigate that. So I immediately stuff my corporate sales team into the Oduduwa remote and attempt to get my opponent to run said Oduduwa. If they do, I get to transfer advancement counters onto the Hortum on HQ, thereby allowing, making HQ more threatening, hopefully deterring them from running HQ. Unfortunately, they just keep hitting R&D and playing mining accidents. They're up to 3 bad pub now, which is going to affect how I'm playing the rest of the game. It's really unlucky that my opponent managed to find 2 of the 3 mining accidents in the top 5th of their deck, but I guess that's why you mulligan. It's quite ironic because typically when you play this identity, Building a Better World, you tend to open with lots of economy cards and can typically fend off mining accidents. However, because I'm playing an Oduduwa deck, I need to keep 7 credits in my pool to rest the Oduduwa. Otherwise, they'll simply steal the sales team without me getting a chance to rest the Oduduwa, which is why I was forced to pay into both mining accidents. Pretty terrible way to do it, but it is what it is. And that's one of the downsides of playing with an ice that you need 7 credits to rest. Alright, I further show up HQ, seeing that there's a Black Orchestra in the bin. My opponent can easily win off HQ if I don't do anything. So I'm going to force the Oduduwa encounter and advance the Ice Wall over the Hortum, because Hortum doesn't scale with advancement counters. The only reason you want to buff up a Hortum is to, as an anti-AI breaker tech. But my opponent's obviously not running AI breakers, so I would prefer to have the Ice Wall on HQ that scales with advancement counters. So my opponent steals the sales team, but I get a 4 advanced Ice Wall on HQ. Hopefully that will slow down my opponent. Mandatory draw sees an Orion. So I know my opponent knows that I have drawn into the Orion. I'm not going to install it yet because I'm going to pretend, here's some psychological play here, I'm going to pretend that the only ice in my hand is an Orion. So I'm not going to install an R&D because my opponent knows that at this point I cannot afford to res an Orion. So because of that, my opponent will probably, so I'm going to play the hedge fund here. My opponent knew I drew that off R&D, and if they hold on to the assumption that Orion's the only piece of ice in my hand, they will make the deduction that the R&D ice is now an Orion that they can easily run through, because I again cannot afford to rest the Orion. It's 15 to rest, I only have 13 credits. So based on that assumption, they can actually safely run through R&D, but they choose not to here. In fact, they even ignore my Atlas behind Oduduwa. So at this point, I'm contemplating, do I continue showing up my servers or do I score the Atlas? I decided to score the Atlas. Better score it now than to leave it open for another turn. I need to threaten match point as quickly as possible, and this is the best way to do it. So now they install David, having seen the Orion. Again, it's pretty pointless because I don't have enough money to rest the Orion still. But the fact that I did a no rest on R&D will probably clue them into the fact that R&D ice was an Orion. It's actually not. I'm trying to bluff them. That is the story I'm trying to sell them. R&D ice is Orion, I can't afford to res it, and even if I do, you have the David to kill it. That is not the truth. In reality, the R&D ice is a Masvingo. Obviously, I didn't res it there because they had 3 bad pup. They could easily break the Masvingo with the bad pup. So I'm just going to continue holding this ruse that the R&D ice is an Orion. Now I have enough money to res the Orion, but I still don't do it because I want to sell them the story that it's not worth spending 15 credits to res the Orion. That's the story I'm trying to tell them. I'm trying to convince them that R&D ice is an Orion. The reason I want to make that bluff is because I want to plant the Orion in a place where they least expect it, on the remote. That's what I'm going for. As we know, Orion's unique, so if they think that the R&D ice is an Orion, they will not expect another Orion on the remote. Most decks don't even run 2 copies of Orion, let alone draw both of them in quick succession. So here, I continue selling the Orion story by saying, hey, I don't think I'm going to get the Orion inside res anytime soon, so I'm just going to put another piece of ice outside of R&D to attempt to tax you. I failed to sell that story because, once again, they brazenly ran through my R&D, and it's at this point that I informed them that the R&D ice is not actually an Orion. Maybe it's the one outside, I don't know. I res the Masvingo here because... that's a good question. I have no idea why I res the Masvingo here. Either way, it doesn't really tax them all that much. With 3 bad pup, it only costs 2 credits to break the Masvingo, so I don't know. And yeah, you can see a chat box. My opponent definitely bought the lie that Orion was in the inside of R&D when it wasn't. Maybe I really shouldn't have rested Masvingo. That was a mistake. I should have continued selling that story there. So now they know the jig is up. They're going to run HQ, and that's when my defenses start crumbling. HQ isn't all that expensive. I res all the ice on it, but they still have more than enough money to get through and see another Oduduwa. Okay? So now, where's the Orion? That's the question. They might think the Orion's on R&D, but it's actually on the remote. I think that's the only way I'm going to get out of jail free this game. To score the global food in my hand behind that Orion. It's going to be tricky. I need to induce them to drop the David somehow, because the David can easily bust them through Orion. So here, the alternative is to force them to run through my remote. And I'm going to do that by charging up the MC Austerity. If they don't contest it, I fast advance the global food for the win. If they do contest it, they have to deal with my Orion, they have to deal with my Oduduwa, both of which are things they don't really want to have anything to do with. I draw into a priority requisition here, I keep saying priority construction here. This should be interesting. I continue letting them go past R&D because at this point there's absolutely no way with the ice in my hand that I can that I can stop them from making multiple runs on R&D. Ice Wall and Masvingo just don't do enough by themselves. I need them to run through Oduduwa and charge up the Masvingo or Ice Wall on R&D for it to be taxing enough for them to require credits outside of their bad publicity. We continue charging up the MC Austerity here. And I'm starting to wonder whether I should use preemptive action. That is, the main purpose of it is to reshuffle used MC Austerities back into the deck. Because there are no MCAs in archives just yet, I'm going to hold off on the preemptive action. Instead, I'm going to just play the Beanstalk from my hand, get some credits, and let's see if they are forced to run server 1 this turn. They are. They're going to test run. Okay, so we didn't mention this one downside of Oduduwa. It completely dies to bypass. That's a problem. Bypass allows my opponent to bypass the on-encounter effect, so they don't trigger Oduduwa's advancement counters. Oh, I don't get to offload 4 or 5 advancement counters on my Orion or on my R&D ice. They get to trash the MC austerity for basically free. That pissed me off. I was not happy about that. I really needed them to trigger the Oduduwa there because I really wanted to advance the remote Orion to make it cheaper to res. So, bad luck, right? I'm shit out of luck here. My opponent has accumulated so many turning wheel counters because they have been pummeling R&D every turn. Thankfully, R&D hasn't given way just yet. A lot of my cards are not trashable. There are no NGO. There's only one NGO and no Rashidas in this deck. So I'm feeling fairly confident about R&D holding up. What I'm less confident about is my ability to win through the remote. They still have the David up, and their Femme Fatale makes Oduduwa virtually blank, which is why I use Prycon to get an Oduduwa on the remote, a second Oduduwa. I never install a second Oduduwa, but this situation called for it. Because they have a Femme and they put it in the bin, I knew that they had retrieval run ready to go. They were going to retrieval run the Femme on the Oduduwa that was inside and rest. So I needed an Oduduwa on the outside to distract their Femme. If the Femme is on the inside ice, they cannot Femme the outside Oduduwa, and I'll get another Oduduwa up, which is the objective of this deck, to have a rest Oduduwa that the runner cannot bypass. So let's see how things go. I'm forcing my opponent to run the remote here. Hopefully they bite the bait because I want them to encounter at least one of those Oduduwas to get me back in the game. Again, this deck is centered all around the Oduduwa advancement. If I don't get them off, I may as well just lose the game. So the retrieval run comes as expected, and I have the perfect ice to deal with it. The Colossus. The Colossus will kill them because they don't have MK Ultra. They're running Femme as the breaker, so I actually get the trash program subroutine off. I'm going to kill their David. This means that they can't break the Orion using David, and with the Femme on the inner Oduduwa, my outer Oduduwa will now do the heavy lifting. But they don't bite on the remote just yet. They're not going to run the remote knowing that a single advanced card doesn't win me the game. For me to threaten the game, I need to double advance the remote agenda to threaten a 5-3 agenda. So after analyzing the board state for a while, I decided to obviously advance my global food once and then play the hedge fund from my hand to get some money. It's going to be a bit expensive to rest all the remote ice. The outer Oduduwa costs 7 credits and the Orion costs 3 credits if I transfer advancement counters on it. So that's going to be my game plan. Whether they run it or not, it should be looking good for me. Right, so yeah, so that's the state where we are at. I'm still not looking in good shape because they have 9 turning wheel counters. So this is where I was contemplating. Were they going to use the turning wheel counters on HQ or R&D? R&D is very stacked right now. It has a lot of agendas. 5 agendas in there, and my opponent's going for it. They're going to expend 4 turning wheel counters to see 5 cards. 5 agendas in my deck of 22 cards. They are going to fetch a corporate sales team here. Ooh, not good. They do a swap. Not that it matters. They access a bunch more cards, none of which are agendas. Pretty thankful here, because if they fetch 2 agendas on this run, they can simply run the remote and immediately win the game. Not that they can. They don't have a David. They don't have enough credits to break the Orion, but I didn't see the stim hack come in. Of course I should have expected it. It's Anarch, obviously there's stim hack. So, the stim hacks will allow them to easily break the Orion, as it has all 3 subtypes, meaning that Paperclip can easily bust through it for 7 credits. Now, I surprised them with the outermost Oduduwa. Recall it's unique, so the innermost Oduduwa that was Femme has to be trash. A waste of 7 credits, but that's what you have to do against Femme. I get the Oduduwa trigger on the Orion. I am able to rest the Orion for 3 credits, but at what cost? They are able to break it with Paperclip and Stim Hack as mentioned, and they fetch my global food, bringing them up to 6 agenda points. Alright, not looking good for me. What I need to find right now are my MCA austerities. I need to constantly drag them through Orion, otherwise they'll win the game off turning wheel counters. At this point, if I were my opponent, all I would do this game, for the remainder of the game, is to hit the ice wall on HQ a bunch of times, rack up those turning wheel counters, and then go into R&D for one final push. As I'm frantically searching for my MC austerities that are just not showing up, I'm beginning to feel a sense of panic. And I don't even have time to search for the MCAs. I need to get some money. I need to play the IPO in my hand. This is clicks that I'm not spending drawing those MCAs, playing those MCAs. It's looking pretty bad for me. Eventually, as you see, I do finally find my MCA austerity, but it came way too late. I needed to see more of those in the early game to force my opponent through the Oduduwa. All my opponent has to do is to pummel my R&D, which is now chock full of agendas. With the number of single accesses my opponent was getting, they were sure to find an agenda sooner or later. So all in all, that was kind of a flop for my play and my deck. I did not like the way the game turned out, but hey, failures are part of life. We've got to learn. The most important thing is that we've got to learn from the game and why our deck did not work the way we intended it to. I thought that we were going to have a decent game despite the early agenda flood. My opponent wasn't contesting my HQ agendas. I got the early Prycon, the early Oduduwa, both in my opening hand, yet it was a flop because I did not consider the remaining hoops that I had to jump through in order for Oduduwa to truly shine. I needed to induce my opponent into running my remote multiple times early on. That I didn't because I didn't draw any MCAs. I was drawing agenda after agenda after agenda. I managed to jam 2 of them into the remote and score them, and my opponent contested 1 sales team. That's about it. So I only got 1 Oduduwa trigger in the early mid game. It's not enough. Next thing is, while you are doing your remote shenanigans, you have to make sure your centrals hold up. Because if the runner can win by purely running on your centrals, then what's the point of your remote Oduduwa, right? It's like playing Ginger City Grid, building a 10 ice tower on the remote, but you still lose because the runner ran R&D a bunch of times. The exact situation happened here. No matter how good a remote Oduduwa is, it's useless if your central ice can't hold up by themselves. And that's one thing I neglected. If you ignore the Oduduwa, my unadvanced central ice in the ice walls, the Hortums and the Masvingos just did not do enough work, allowing my opponent to repeatedly hammer my R&D for easy agendas and turning wheel counters. Finally, even after all of that, your strength of your Oduduwa is still contingent on the runner not having tech cards, namely bypass effects and hunting grounds. My opponent's fam caused me a lot of problems. It cost me an extra 7 credits just to get the second Oduduwa rest. And that second Oduduwa only got 1 trigger itself to get the Orion rest for 3 credits instead of 15. All in all, very mediocre for a 7 rest cost ice. So, I guess the main takeaway is that you need to jump through a lot of hoops in order to justify running Oduduwa in your 49 card deck. There are just so many other better ice out there that can do things more efficiently and with less prerequisites than Oduduwa. So while it wasn't a successful usage of Oduduwa, I hope you all have learned its weaknesses and the stuff that you need to keep in mind while building an Oduduwa deck or playing one. What about Masvingo? I can't really, sure, it didn't really hold up this game, but I don't think I gave it a fair shot. After all, if you think about it, against the gold standard Fractor in Paperclip, Masvingo actually has a decent ratio. You pay 3 to res Masvingo, they pay 2 credits each time they want to run through it. It's a decent res cost to break cost ratio. The trouble this game was that the 2 break cost was entirely negated by bad publicity, which is why I don't think I gave it a fair shot. If I built a more resilient deck, one that can avoid mining accidents, Masvingo would have been of more use. And if I had less clunky ways in which to advance Masvingo, it would have scaled much better. So I cannot make a definitive verdict of Masvingo based on this game alone. However, one definitive thing I can say about Masvingo is that it is inherently weak because it has no painful face check element. This applies to all barriers with only end-run subroutines. Your ice walls, your fire walls, your Hadrian's walls, your oh wait, that has rotated. All these ice are terribly weak to the turning wheel because a good runner will simply bounce off your end-run ice, gaining 4 turning wheel counters a turn while you're slowly trying to set up your win. If you're not playing a deck that can rush out the game fast enough, you are going to lose to the turning wheel, make no mistake. And I had too many of such end-run ice, 6 of them in my deck, 3 ice walls, 3 Masvingos. Only the Colossus were able to provide any sort of face check pressure, and even then, the 6 credits to res was a pain because I was already spending a lot of money to res the the Oduduwa on the remote. So yeah, basically this deck, well, I didn't really carefully consider the impact of Turning Wheel versus this deck. Masvingo and Ice Wall, while good in in theory, just don't hold up if your deck isn't designed to win quickly enough. So yeah, let's end off by talking a bit about other combo cards and non-bo cards that we did not cover with this deck. Cards that combo nicely with Oduduwa. I did not draw the twins this game, so I wasn't able to showcase the impact of forcing the runner into Oduduwa multiple times. It's a pretty good way to get Oduduwa to trigger lots of times. Another possible card you can use is Code Replicator, if you can afford to shell out the 2 influence per pop. This is a much less janky card that doesn't require you to have spare copies of Oduduwa in your hand. This is something that can easily be set up, and they'll have to hit the Oduduwa twice if they want to get to the bottom of your remote, giving you lots of Oduduwa triggers. Pretty good, I would say. Along with Masvingo, actually, this is something I did not consider in my deck building phase. In retrospect, if I were to redo this successful demo, I probably would have considered playing Masvingo and Oduduwa in Builder of Nations. One thing I did not consider was that both Masvingo and Oduduwa have an important clause in common: the fact that they gain advancement counters on res. This is unique to all the other Wayland advanceable ice. This means that by themselves, in a Builder of Nations deck, of course, they can trigger BON. The runner might feel safe running into R&D if it has no upgrades and no advanceable ice on it, and then pop, you res the Masvingo, and they're like, whoops, I have to take the meat damage now. This is a very nasty surprise, and one that I completely overlooked in the deck building phase. If you were to attempt a successful demo of Masvingo and Oduduwa yourself, I would highly recommend trying out a Builder of Nations deck. There seems to be a lot of synergy there. The 2 main issues you have to address, however, that I didn't have to worry about in this BABW deck are: number 1, how are you going to get the money to res Oduduwa? BON is a poor identity, it is not an economy ID, so you need to have a lot of money cards to afford resing the Oduduwa. Number 2, you need to have counter currents because Employee Strike just makes you cry. You won't get your meat damage off. So these are the 2 things you have to address in your 44 card deck, and you have fewer influence to do it. But I think it's a much better home than BABW. I would redo it if I could. Right, moving on to the non-bos. I think a lot of you would be screaming at your screens, not because I played BABW over BON, but because I played BABW over SSO. I think a lot of you would have thought that SSO is a better ID for Oduduwa than Building a Better World is. And I'm here to tell you, if you thought that was the case, you haven't thought it through well enough. I'm gonna give you 3 big reasons why you should not play Oduduwa in SSO Industries. Firstly, it's overkill. You don't need that many advancement counters. SSO by itself will give you more than enough advancement counters to pull off whatever shenanigans you want, be it mass commercialization, Red Planet couriers, or simply getting 3 advancement counters on every single of your installed ice. You do not need more Oduduwa counters to do that. SSO by itself is stronger than Oduduwa and will do all the work for you. So yeah, playing Oduduwa is just overkill. Not to mention that, again, you have to address the weakness of Oduduwa being 7 to res. SSO decks typically do not like spending money to res their ice. They play typically the space ice that costs 0 to res when you have 3 advancement counters on them. As such, they can thrive with a lot less economy in the deck. Oduduwa goes completely against that. You have to restructure your deck to have enough money. Not to mention that you don't get to play the powerful money cards that are typically associated with Wayland. You don't play NGO front in SSO because you can't bluff agendas. Your agendas are public, so there's no reason to play NGO front. You also don't play the powerful early econ card in Hostile Takeover because, well, you don't want to take bad pub. It's simple as that, and your agenda suite doesn't really gel with Hostile Takeover. The bottom line is SSO decks are typically poor. They don't play the typical powerful economy cards, so you shouldn't play a 7 to res and the run ice in SSO. The last and the most important reason is that Oduduwa does not gel well with your typical SSO agenda suite at all. SSO decks typically run the 3-point agendas in Hollywood Renovation and City Works project. Those are pretty good agendas, yes? However, we mentioned when introducing Oduduwa that you want to force the runner to run your remote as many times as possible. But how are you going to do that if your agendas bring the runner halfway to victory and are public on top of that? You know, the runner sees a public agenda in your Oduduwa remote, fine, they contest it, they give you one Oduduwa trigger, suddenly they're halfway towards winning the game, and you can't really drag them through the remote anymore. If you offer a second agenda, they'll just win by running your remote again, or come very close anyway. So basically what I'm saying is, with your big public agendas, there are very few opportunities to induce runners into running your remote. As such, your Oduduwa will not trigger enough times to justify running it as an ice, a 7 rest cost ice. Oduduwa is terrible in SSO industries, and you should be ashamed of yourself if you are thinking that it works well in SSO. That's what I feel. Feel free to prove me wrong. In the meantime, as always, thanks for watching and happy building of nations. Goodbye!